There's a lot of questions swirling around, especially in my mind. Is a new Earth a personal state of being like a self-help program? Or is it an actual change to the planet itself that's going to bring some people along and leave others behind? I figured we need to hear from a real expert on the new Earth, so I'm going to put my questions to Maureen St. Germain. Maureen is an intuitive and a mystic. As a best-selling author, she literally wrote the book on waking up in 5D. She writes about accessing the Akashic Records and numerous topics related to spiritual awakening. She's taught in 24 countries, her books are published in 12 languages, and she even founded the St. Germain School of Mystery to share practical skills that help everyday people seek guidance from their own higher selves. And one thing that stuck out to me is that, like me, she comes to this topic after decades in leadership roles in the corporate and government worlds, so she can surely appreciate the value of evidence-based decisions. So Maureen, welcome. You've described yourself as living in 5D pretty much full-time, but not always. So let me start by asking the big question. What does 5D, or the new Earth, mean to you? How would you explain it to someone unfamiliar or even skeptical about it?
I'd like to thank you for that lovely introduction. It was very nice. So in answer to your question, 5D is the equivalent of what everyone in the religion movement would say is heaven. So if you grew up in a traditional religion, you wouldn't understand what heaven is. And that's like 5D. What happens in 5D is you don't have dark thoughts. You still have creativity. You still have interactions with people. And in fact, this is the first time that we're actually moving into that realm as a species, as a consciousness, without giving up our human bodies. So we're taking it all with us. We don't have to die. Now, 5D means that there's no polarity, and it doesn't mean we don't have choice. So is red good or bad? Is green good or bad? You see, and you might have connotations for it, but neither color is better than the other. Might be better for you. You might look better in red or in white, and so on. So there is no polarity. And the other thing that's really new for most people is the awareness of the others. So for example, let's say you come to my house and I invite you in, and I instantly know that you don't drink coffee, so I offer you tea. In the old way, I might say, would you like a coffee? And you'd say, no, I don't drink coffee. And then I'd say, well, would you like a tea? And then you'd say, no, actually, I don't feel like it. And then I might say, well, would you like water? But in 5D, we have an awareness of people and what their needs are. We're connected at higher levels. So it doesn't even occur to us to offer the wrong thing, or to offer the inappropriate thing, or the hurtful thing.
So is 5D a personal mindset, or something that the new Earth is moving to in mass by some deadline?
Okay, this is another really good question. I do not see it happening en masse, and the Earth has already ascended. We are catching up. So what that means is we're moving into our ascended self, which is the 5D self, and every one of us is sliding into 5D and back out again, which brings you back to that very first question that you asked, what's it like to be in 5D? And the answer is pretty yummy until something happens to knock you up. You know, if somebody random, you hit somebody in the rear end. Let's say you just, lost track of what you were doing and accidentally rear-ended them. Maybe it wasn't a big collision. After all, you weren't moving that fast. So the client, the other person, and the other driver comes up to you and reads you the riot act in a very mean way, maybe using profanity and so on. That might knock you up. You might take it in 5D and then later go, man, that guy was really nuts. And you process it then, but you are not finding yourself reacting to other people's anger or frustration. And later, if you're needing to process it because they hit you on a raw spot, you might be, I'll use the word, a little bit down for a little bit, maybe slide into fourth, and then back up, but you won't stay there very long. The more you practice being in 5D, the more likely you are to remain there. And there's lots of ways that we can take steps to improve the likelihood that we stay in 5D.
Maybe you could expand on the comment you made about the Earth already having moved to 5D and we're catching up. I know there's a lot of writing about the Earth splitting and there being a 3D Earth with people left behind on it versus a 5D Earth.
Okay, so your question is well placed. This is really hard for people to grasp. My guides have said there are 3 Earths. One crash and burn, one with the do-overs, the people who are good people but just haven't accepted that they're bigger than what they are, that they have a God spark that allows them to be co-creator in their universe. And then there's the people who are ascending, who are focused and working with a source and doing their own spiritual work. Now, what I want you to think about, and I can see this on your face, we got to give up the linear model. It's not linear. And so when we give up the linear model, then we don't have to think about sequence or time. And instead, we understand that everything is happening at once and can influence other things. And so as we become fifth dimensional, a number of things are happening to us. Number one, we're taking timelines that we have chosen and weaving them back together into one whole experience. And what a lot of people don't realize is when you make a decision, let's say a big decision about which college to go to, and you've been accepted at several, the good second choice is a timeline that you follow. And you might not be aware of it. You might dream that you went to the other school. But that timeline, the road not taken, is in the reality. And then you merge those. When you completely give it up, your attachment and desire around that decision, then those energies fade into your current timeline. Now, if you were in the college of your choice thinking, oh man, I should have gone to the other school. This is not working for me. I don't like the place. I don't like the people, blah, blah, blah. Then you're keeping that alternate version alive until you make up your mind whether or not you're going to transfer in. And the same is true with regret. When we regret something, we're funding the alternate timeline.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the crash and burn Earth, I'm sure that's going to get a lot of people's interest. Can you describe that a little more?
Yes. Well, there will be, I'll use the word clones or other versions of you on those timelines that will have some of your energy in it. But depending upon where you put your own focus, that's where you'll reside. So you could have more than one version of yourself. We already see that in timelines. And it's the same would be true in the crash and burn. You would slowly fade from that system and put all of your energy in the one you are in. And I've also been told that the do-over Earth and the ascending Earth are going to be able to interact for 3 generations. So it's not like, on July 4th, we celebrate Independence Day here in America. It's more like people will have a chance to shift and change their belief systems. I remember when I told my father that you didn't have to dial 1 when you were in New York City and you could still make a, quote, long distance phone call. And he didn't believe me. And so our policy at our house, fortunately, I was in a good, my father was very smart, and he said, prove it. And so I found the data to show him and prove it. So, these things that are common beliefs, we're going to gradually shift. Now, if you think back on how or when you learn sex education, there's a big, I'll call it paradigm shift, because a lot of children either learned it on the streets or they learned it in school. They didn't hear it from their parents. So it wasn't as safe an environment as it could be. And there's the shock factor. Oh my God, that's how a baby gets made? It's like, it's that what I would call cognitive dissonance. That's the first time humans have cognitive dissonance, is when they discover the thing about sex. So what will happen is the cognitive dissonance will be very gentle. At one time, the beings of light that I communicate with shared with me that they were concerned about what I would call meltdown energy of people hearing something very unusual and then being so terrified by this new version of the reality that they literally, had a mental meltdown. Some people are so wedded to the idea that the earth is the only place in creation that has a life form. You could see, whereas if they discovered other beings or had one knock at their door, they might have a meltdown if they were really stuck in that belief system. And what makes people stuck in a belief system is very interesting. It mostly is a safety net. If I do everything you tell me to and you promise me I'll get to heaven, I'll feel safe because I trust you.
Maureen, do you think that the worsening divide we see between the woke and the anti-woke movements, or even liberals and conservatives, or people that have different views of the outcome of the previous elections, do they represent the societal split?
No, I don't. I think these are all things that the media has played up and emphasized. If you have a neighbor who is brown or black, they are a good neighbor. They're friendly. You can borrow something from them. They can borrow something from you. It's not a big deal. So for most people, those divisions that we are being told are problematic aren't. And the same is true with all the stuff we see in Congress and the public stage. We're talking about a very small population who is certainly allowed to have an expression, but not to the detriment of others. And that's what the big drama is about. And those divisions that are being played up aren't coming from heart-centered people. They're coming from people who want division to continue. Because if we're divided amongst ourselves, then we won't fight Big Brother.
Interesting. So what's going to happen after these 3 generations? Are we going to see more harmony?
Okay. So now let me help you with this. This is going to be really funny, I hope. There won't be more harmony. There will be harmony. Because more implies that there's a lack. Isn't that interesting?
So will anybody truly be left behind?
Everyone has free will. And when you come to this place called Earth, you get free will. Even if you're already an ascended master, even if you're already an angel, even if you're already a criminal, you still get free will once you get here. And so any contracts you make, any promises you make, they're all up for grabs. Most people don't know that. So they're marching along to what's in front of them or marching along to what comes their way, unwilling to deviate from what appears to be an opportunity. So as people shift and then they have children, their children will be more open and willing to be egalitarian towards everyone. And so it's a very soft and gentle shift. And what I was trying to say before is the powers that be that I work with on the inner realms were concerned about these meltdowns that they could see. And then they conveyed to me that they had devised a way for humanity to make their shift without these meltdowns. Because if we're shifting to, quote, harmony, we don't want meltdown garbage that we have to process. So the transformation and the transition has to be so subtle and so smooth you can hardly tell. It's like that cartoon, Where's Waldo? You have to really look. And here's something else that a lot of people have experienced. I don't know if you have, but they have someone in their life that they care about that kind of makes fun of you, oh, you and that astrology thing, or, that kind of stuff. And you like this person a lot and you were friends with them before you discovered what you discovered. So you don't mind. You're fine with that. And then one day they call you up and they start asking you about astrology, the thing that they used to make fun of. And you answer their questions politely and help them understand, blah, blah, blah. And then that night you think, wait a minute. Davina didn't even like astrology. She thought it was stupid. And now she's exploring it for herself. And in that moment, you make a shift. That old timeline has melted into a new one. And now Davina won't even remember that she used to make fun of the astrology. She'll just remember that she had a recent interest in it, and she's so excited.
I think I've been on both sides of that. I've been the one that shifted to be more open-minded than I used to be, as well as having people in my own life go through that transformation as well. When you get the information that you have received, can you maybe speak a little bit about how that comes to you? What are your sources of information about awakening?
I practice the Merkaba, and I practiced it since 1995. 1994 is when I learned it. 95 is when I began teaching it. And I did that guided meditation every day for 8 years. Most people do it every day until it becomes permanent, which could be a couple of months or could be 6 weeks. But my guides were very clear with me that I was to continue to do it, even though it was already permanent. Now, in hindsight, I can say, well, that's because I was meant to teach it. And I did teach it all over the world. And I've written books about it. So the visibility is there in terms of my understanding of this work. Now, this particular body of knowledge is I'll call it a bodysuit, but it's the shape I have behind me here. And that shape is called the Merkaba. It's really a star tetrahedron, one tetrahedron nested in another tetrahedron. And when you activate those fields around you, and everyone has these fields around them, you're just learning to turn them on when you do the Merkaba meditation. But the cool thing about the Merkaba is it only takes 5 minutes to do. And I still do it pretty regularly. Now, what happens is that gives you your fifth dimensional uniform, whether you've earned it or not. And so what happens is the capacity to do your mission improves greatly because you don't have the inner resistance that you used to have. And it gives you ways to learn and grow. Another thing that I do, and I teach this on all of my classes and all of my books, and it's even on the app that we have of all the guided meditations that I've done called Illuminate. This is free on Illuminate, and that is a higher self protocol. And the protocol is very simple. It's 3 easy steps that you practice for 6 weeks. You do a little meditation where you ask for your symbols or signals for yes, no, and neutral. And these are inner signals. So you could have an itchy ear. You could see a color. You might feel something in your fingers or your toes for yes, and then something different for no, and then maybe something in the center of your body for neutral. We explain all what that is, but then for 6 weeks you practice on unimportant stuff. Is it my highest and best good to go to this restaurant? I'm meeting my friends. They let me pick. Where is it my highest best good to go this place? No. Let's say you don't eat bread. Is it my highest best good to go to the pizza place? Yes. Really? Yes. Okay. So you show up and you run into somebody that you've been looking for a while. Cool stuff like that starts to happen. Now, how do you make a decision? You and I, and our normal human self, make a decision by thinking about it, by researching on the internet, asking our friends. So you're buying a car, you check out the rates for the insurance. You do all that little research. Then maybe you narrow it down to a couple of cars. And then you ask your higher self. And this is after your 6 weeks of practice where you've played with your higher self and gotten really good answers. You now have a history. Normally, we rely on history to help us make decisions. You don't have any history with your higher self giving you advice. You might have intuition that you sometimes trust, but wouldn't it be nice to always know that your higher self is always right? And that's how you get that, by doing that higher self protocol. And that's free on the app.
As part of my investigation, I will surely be participating in that 6-week exercise.
Well, this is a fun story. If we have time, I'd like to share it. That is, I was on a plane and I was coming back from the West Coast. I had stayed an extra day so I could meet with someone, knowing that I'd have an overnight flight back. I don't like overnight flights because it's too hard to sleep. And then that same day, I would be turning myself around and going to the East Coast. But first, I was going to go home to my home in the Midwest. So when I'm getting off the plane in Madison, Wisconsin, the small town, the clerk, who's now moving luggage, looks up and says, "Oh, hi, Maureen," because I see her when I check in. I was flying every week. She knew me by name, and now she's moving luggage. Okay, so she's doing both. And I said, "Hi," and she said, "How are you doing?" Now I'm really focused on the fact that I have to turn myself around and be back. So I said, "Oh, well, I'm having my day from blank because I got to be back here in a couple hours." And as soon as I said it, I thought, "Oh, I don't want to talk that way." And I had been using that as an example for someone, not realizing that I've added it to my own everyday language. So I immediately corrected myself and said, "Yes, but I'm having a day of heaven on earth because I'm flying with United." Okay, she laughs, I laugh. I get home and there's a flood in my basement. Turns out there's a pipe that has a small leak and it's been climbing, the water's been climbing over the faucet in the laundry room where the hoses are open. So I call my neighbor and he comes over. We turn the water off. I call the plumber. The plumber came when he said he would in 1 hour. And he said, "Where do you want me to drill the first hole?" And my neighbor had already said, there's a bunch of houses in this neighborhood that were built with this crappy pipe. You're probably one of them, blah, blah, blah. So I asked my higher self where to drill. And that spot that I told him to drill gave him a full visibility of what the problem was. And then he only had to drill one more small hole to fix it. That cost me $120. That's all it cost. And then my neighbor said he'd come over and make sure he'd check on the fans we put in between the walls. And I went to the bank and made my bank deposit from the previous workshop. And then I come into the house and my landline is ringing. And it's the United Airlines. And they said, both of our feeder flights into Chicago are running 1 hour late. Oh, by the way, I had also called the airline and said, "Can I get on the later flight to the East Coast? Because I've got this drama going on." They waived the regular $100 fee at that time, and they put me on the later flight. Okay, so now I'm getting a live phone call saying, "Can you possibly be on the earlier flight that's now not going until an hour later?" Well, my suitcase was already packed. I changed out all the supplies, and I'm 15 minutes from the airport. So I said, "Yeah, I can make that." And so I got in the car calmly and drove to the airport, made the first flight, which is now an hour late, made my connections. When I'm on the plane, I say to myself, "What is going on? How did I pull that off?" And right away, my guides came in and said, "Well, you said you called for a day of heaven on earth." And so then I thought, oh, well, the next time I have a chock-a-block day, I'm going to ask my higher self and my angels and guides for a day of heaven on earth. And the second time I did it, I thought, I'm asking for this every day, and so can everyone else. Now, what I really want people to understand is when you say, I am asking for a day of heaven on earth, what you're asking for is the equivalent of 5D. So I now say, I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with and everyone I am in contract with. So even if I don't talk to my webmaster today, I want him to have a day of heaven on earth as well. And I think you mentioned the other thing that I recommend that how people get into 5D proactively is before you go to bed at night to say, I am waking up in 5D.
Yes, and I've also used your technique about if you're running late for something to ask the lords of time, the Time Lord, to help you your schedule work out and to get there on time. I've tried that a few times when I was running late, and I did surprisingly arrive in the nick of time.
That's fabulous. I'm so happy to hear this. You know, when the Lords of Time came through me the very first time, I was like, what? You know, I never had heard of these guys. Where did that come from? And they came through with such I sat down to open up to receive a channeled message from beings of 100% God light. And normally it's this pantheon of ascended masters that I bring forward. But when these guys came through, I didn't even have a chance to think it. They just like plowed right through into my voice. We are the Lords of Time. And, I'm going, wow, how interesting. And they have given us some really powerful information over the years. So that's very cool. And I'm really grateful to hear your share on that. That means a lot to me.
I was a little skeptical, but I can't argue.
Well, and what I like about you being skeptical is that you're still trying. You're still, all right, let me check it out. Let me prove her wrong.
Do you have any actual evidence that the techniques you're talking about aren't just training your subconscious mind to make different decisions? Or is it all really the same thing?
I do not believe it's the subconscious. I believe the subconscious is still part of the human form. The higher self is connected to source. So when we train ourselves to tap into the higher self, we are literally connecting ourselves with the part of ourselves that already knows God. So I don't think it's the subconscious at all.
So Maureen, why are you personally convinced that all this is real? A lot of other viewers may not be. What is your single best piece of evidence?
Okay, I'll give you an example. My sons would say I'm not the world's best driver. I'll start with that. And I'm driving home by myself from Minnesota to Madison or something like that. From someplace in Minnesota, probably Minneapolis, from a workshop. It was late at night, and a semi comes past me, a double truck, a tractor trailer rig. And my guides came in, my higher self came in and said, get into his slipstream. Now, for those of you who don't know what that word means, the slipstream is the airfoil behind a truck that if you get close enough, you can actually ride on their energy, cost them more gas, and you use less. Okay. My sons have already told me that this is a really wrong thing to do when they see it, okay? So I already know it's a bad idea. And I say to myself, what? No way. Yes, now. Are you sure? Yes. So I'm getting confirmation because sometimes I'm thinking, this is just wacky stuff. And so I'm behind this guy, and my turnoff is coming up to go to the next freeway. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder which way the truck's going to go because I'm taking that turnoff. Well, the truck was taking the same turnoff. And so as it began the turn, I asked again, am I to stay with the truck? Higher self, am I to stay with the truck? Yes, stay with the truck. So I'm staying with the truck. Then the trucker is now on the berm at 60 or 70 miles an hour on this curve. And again, I ask, higher self, am I supposed to stay with this guy? Yes, move over now. And so I did. And another car came the wrong way, going very fast.
Wow.
We finished the turnout, and I ask again, higher self, do I need to stay with the truck? No, you're okay. I think that's pretty tangible.
Yeah.
And I have tons of stories like that you get told to do something. And this is the benefit of the higher self practice. You take 6 weeks and you're playful. You ask about unimportant stuff you don't care about that you are willing to do. So if if you have a sweet tooth and you're looking at some donuts, just eat the donut and enjoy it. But if you're willing to not eat the donut, maybe you got a sweet tooth where you're trying to break yourself, and you ask your higher self and your higher self says no, then when you get offered the donut, you say, no, thank you. And it's not a big deal. So there's this quality of playfulness and a quality of willingness. I had a gal in a class in China that at breakfast, she asked her higher self a question, and she comes into class all upset. Why would my higher self lie to me? And I said, well, what did you ask? And she said, I asked my higher self if I should have meat, and I'm a vegan. And of course, everybody in the class started to laugh because the 3 rules are pretty straightforward. Ask yes or no questions 30 or 40 times a day about stuff you're willing to do. Second rule, always follow through. If you ask, you have to follow through. If you want to do it, don't ask, just enjoy. And the third rule is give up all your other forms of divination for yourself. If you're, a healer or a practitioner of some sort and you use a pendulum for something, go for it. But if you are asking about yourself, you set that aside and only ask your higher self and only on important stuff. And then if you need to do an important question, you make that an exception. So, of course, what happened with this lady is she was testing her higher self to see if it would give her the answer she wanted it to give her. And truth be told, maybe she'd been a vegan too long and needed to have some meat. You never know.
And in your book, you talk about some environmental factors that hold people back from ascension, like genetically modified food, fluoridated water, Wi-Fi in the airwaves. Can you expand on that a little more?
Let's start with fluoridated water. That is an original plan to sanitize the water. And at the time it was invented and used, it probably was a big solution to a problem. But we don't need that anymore because we have other ways to purify our water. And fluoridation causes the pineal gland to calcify. If your pineal gland is full of calcium, you cannot use it to connect to source. So it stands in the way of your progress. So that's the first thing. We don't need fluoridated water anymore. And most people who are on ascension path go out of their way to avoid fluoridated water. But here's the thing. Dentists, all dental products are fluoridated. So my approach is you're going to get fluoride no matter what. And, if you go to the dentist, and most people do, there's a few exceptions, you're going to get, I'll call it, a load up of fluoride. So you choose to do something about it. You take something that will help decalcify the pineal. With regard to GMO food, we don't know what GMO food will do because we have not had a generation of humans who have been eating GMO foods. We don't have history to prove that that is not a problem. The other thing is there's a mixing of genes at a different level that is causing certain things to happen that in the early analysis doesn't look good. And I'm relying on science on that. I'm not just tuning in. And the third thing is this is totally a tune in for me. But because I'm so sensitive, I can feel Wi-Fi. I can feel when it's turned up. I can feel when it's at a higher frequency. And when I say higher, I don't mean higher in frequency. I mean higher in volume, higher in pushing out, because the push out of Wi-Fi is different in different locations, and it's different in different homes. And it's also different in different subdivisions, depending upon how many kids are playing on video games. And okay, so that's the setup. And then from my guides, I clearly got that we are being broadcast fear energy. So anything we're afraid of, we get more afraid of. And then there's two other things that are predominant on all forms of wireless communication, whether it's your cell phone, whether it's Wi-Fi in your home or in, your office. And it also comes over the TV waves. And those two things are forget, 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 reject, reject, reject. So you learn something that opens you up, but then you forget about it. So even the people who are attempting to open themselves up are finding this. Now, my only proof to this is I have a very good friend in New York City who absolutely refuses to have any kind of Wi-Fi. So she has no Wi-Fi in her home. She does not watch TV. She does watch internet TV. She does not have a cell phone. And her ability to experience and remember is phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal. And this woman's in her 70s, and she has a better memory than I do. And I think it's because she has chosen consciously to not subject herself to that stuff. And whether she knows that it does this to you or not is immaterial. What matters is I'm seeing the evidence. And when I told her that this was going on, she was shocked, but she doesn't experience it because she doesn't partake in that part of the transformation of the planet.
So what I don't hear you saying is that there's any conspiracy or government influence that's trying to prevent people from ascending to a fifth density life.
Well, you won't hear me do that for two reasons. Number one, it's not very 5D to be pointing fingers. And number two, it doesn't matter who is responsible. What matters is we don't want it. If we care about who's doing it, then we've fallen into their game and it keeps us locked into polarity. Anytime we move into judgment about something, it drops us back into 3D. And see, what people don't understand, and this is a very profound statement, this was channeled by one of the masters that I work with. I think it was Sanat Kumar, but I don't remember. I remember the message, but I don't necessarily remember who gave it to me. I'll look it up. He said, the game is over, referring to no more karma. Okay? That game is over. So we're moving from, let's say, football to soccer. The rules are different. They look similar. If you see a bunch of people on a playing field, looks like a football field to me. So the game is over. The game will end when there are no more players. Will you be the first to leave or the last?
I have heard that the rules of karma as a governing law of our incarnations has ended, and that now it's more of an optional guideline that we can use in planning a life and in the experiences of our lives. It sounds similar to what you were saying about the game changing.
We don't need karma at all. We can choose to stay in a place of unconditional love. Unconditional love allows us to be neutral about everything. And I'll give you an example. A grandma who's watching her 3-year-old, the 3-year-old gets into the peanut butter and makes a huge mess. Grandma just helps clean it up, doesn't say a word, doesn't complain, maybe even laughs. Today's grandma might take a few pictures. Wait till you see what your granddaughter did. My granddaughter did now, and post it. But that's a joyful expression. She doesn't complain at all about that. It took me 2 hours to clean that up. That's a 5D energetic. That's 5D experience. So we already have plenty of opportunities to choose 5D, and we get to understand it by looking at these kinds of scenarios that we know exist.
Yeah, my family's involved with the Cub Scouts, and we have, planning camping events, and everyone works as a team and does what they need to do, and everyone has a great time together. It's a very 5D experience, I believe.
That would be a very 5D experience. I agree. So there's lots of experiences that we're already doing this 5D. And that's the cool thing. When we start to realize, okay, yeah, our humanity has not caught up with our technology. At the same time, we can point to lots of things like the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, all those opportunities to help change the reality are there. And we have some experience with it. So it won't be that foreign as we move into that being our only choice. And when I say only choice, again, when we take away the negative side of things, it doesn't mean we don't have free will. What it means is the dark side of choices has melted away like snow on a spring day. It's just gone. So if we have time, I can take you through a short meditation that would be the nice setup for doing the higher self practice. Those of you who are listening, if you want to put your feet flat on the floor, that would be good. And hands can be touching, but don't cross your arms. So you can let your fingers touch or put your hands together, whatever way feels good, in front of you. And you can close your eyes and remember a time when you've held the little one in your arms. The little one could be a pet or an infant. It doesn't even have to be yours. It could even be a big pet, like a horse. Some being that does not have any kind of bias on it, can't help but love the horse or the dog or the cat or the baby. And then hear yourself say to that little one, I love you, several times. And what will happen is you will feel your chest expand. And that energy of expansion is the feeling of your heart chakra opening. Now send a beam, like a flashlight beam of love and light, up your pranic tube, past your throat chakra, your third eye chakra, your crown chakra, all the way up to your 8th chakra, where the portal to your higher self exists. Now we invite the higher self to join us. And the lowest place the higher self can join us is the heart. So we've now made a space, we've created unconditional love, so it's a safe environment, appropriate environment for the higher self. And now we have a conversation with the higher self, and I'm going to give you the script. Higher self, I really want to improve my connection with Source and with you. Higher self, I am looking to practice this tool called the Higher Self Connection. So I need some help from you. Can I count on it? You might not hear an answer, but you've made a request and that will be heard. Now, higher self, show me my symbol or signal for yes. Some people in their mind's eye see a thumbs up for yes. Some people have a sensation in their body like an itchy ear or a finger that twitches or something at their nose. Some people see a color or a geometric shape. Higher self, show me my signal for yes. Thank you. Higher self, show me my symbol or signal for no. What does no look like, feel like, taste like? What does it smell like? Higher self, give me my symbol or signal for no. Some people actually hear a word, no. Thank you. Higher self, show me my symbol or signal for neutral. Most people feel neutral in one of two ways. They either feel it in the body as a sense of emptiness in the spinal column or in the pranic tube that sits in front of the spine. Some people observe it as a flat line, like a horizon. And some actually see it as a vertical line. Again, higher self, show me my signal for neutral. Thank you. Okay, so we give thanks to the higher self for joining us and staying with us, and we ask the higher self to stay with us all day, no matter what's going on. And then open your eyes and write down what you got. So take a minute and do that for me, please. You have a pen handy?
Not real close, but I was gonna say what you mentioned, the thumbs up, like a green thumbs up, and then a red thumbs down, and then even before you mentioned the horizontal line, I pictured a black line with the white background.
Perfect. And I'm so grateful you put it on the recording, because now everybody knows what yours is, but it's also validation, because sometimes people switch it up and they say, oh no, my no was this and my yes was that. And I'm thinking I was there when you said it. So I'm really glad it's on tape. So here's what happens. For 45 days, you ask your higher self unimportant, insignificant questions 30 to 50 times a day. Now, for a lot of people, That's hard to do. And if that's you, then what you do is you write down 40 things that you could ask your higher self. So you're having breakfast. Higher self, am I to have oatmeal? No. Higher self, is it my highest and best good to have eggs? No. Higher self, is it my highest and best good to have a smoothie? No. Higher self, am I supposed to skip breakfast? Yes. And then you discover, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be at the doctor and they're doing a test where I'm not supposed to eat. You see, cool stuff like that starts to happen. Okay, that's the first thing. That's the first rule. Unimportant, insignificant questions many times a day, 30, 40 times a day, about stuff you are willing to do. So, on the skipping breakfast, you're thinking, oh man, I want to have breakfast. I'm hungry. And then you think, well, let me see how I do. Maybe I can skip breakfast. And so then you go to your calendar and that's what you see. And you're going, oh my gosh, I'm so glad my higher self told me don't eat. I don't have to cancel this appointment. Okay. The second rule is always follow through. And that part's hard because people will ask and then they don't feel like following through, so they don't. And of course, that's self-sabotage. And my premise is if you feel like you want a cookie, I used to have a sweet tooth for cookies, just eat one. Don't make it a big deal. Just enjoy the cookie. If, however, you are willing to skip the cookie, and I can remember being at a class years and years ago where at the checkout counter, everybody's had lunch. And wouldn't you know it, they put these nice chocolate chip cookies on the counter, in a nice display case. And I'm looking at them and I'm in such a habit of asking my higher self. I didn't even realize what I was doing when I said higher self. I said, my highest best good to have a cookie. And the answer was no. And I'm a little disappointed, but I'm okay with that. But then one of my students says, Maureen, didn't you see that they had these chocolate chip cookies? And I had to say no a second time. It was a little harder. No, thank you. The third rule is no other divination tool. So you set aside your pendulum, muscle testing, and all of that in favor of the higher self, because you will be tempted to double check your higher self if you continue to use your pendulum. And one time when I gave a lecture to the Canadian Dowsers Society, I said to them, how many of you have had your pendulum lie to you? I was teaching them this protocol. And about 70% of the hands go up. Now, I'm in shock because I'm thinking 70%, 100% should be going up. Everybody's had their pendulum tell them something that's not true or didn't work out, right? So I thought to myself, what am I going to say to these people? And out of my mouth came the words, well, the rest of you are in denial. And the whole crowd cracked up. So the thing is, our pendulum can let us down. Our muscle testing can let us down. I have influenced other people's pendulums just to make a point. And when I did this to the little girl who was the daughter of one of my students, she was showing off her new pendulum, very precocious young woman. And I told her, she said, it's not working for me. I don't know what's going on. And I said, I'm controlling your pendulum. Why would you do that? And I laughed and said, because I want you to use your higher self. It's going to give you much more accurate information than anything else because it can't be compromised. I can't compromise you and your higher self connection. No one can. And that's why it's so powerful. I've had so many amazing, wonderful experiences with my higher self. One of the other stories that I love to tell is where my higher self, I tried to reach a reporter all day long, and part of my job was to get our stories in the newspaper. And so at 5 minutes till 5, my higher self comes in and says, call the guy. And my response is, no, I'm hungry. I want to go home and eat. Call the guy. No, I've got kids at home. They want to eat. They're going to be waiting for me. Call the guy. Okay, fine. And I will tell people, it's okay to argue with your higher self after your 45 days. But if your higher self persists, go with it. Don't say no more than twice. So you can say no, but not more than twice. So I called the reporter, and the first things out of his mouth is, what? How could you possibly know that I would be here at this time? I'm never here at this time. And the best part is my story made the front page of the largest newspaper in the state the following morning.
Yes.
They didn't have anything better, I guess, but it was okay with me. And that's the whole point. That is the whole point. Your higher self knows stuff you don't know, but knows where those things will fall together and put you where you want to be. You know, one of the things, I don't know how we are in time, but one of the things that I know is that we have 5 possible directions that we take when we make a decision. 2 below grade and 3 above grade. And the top one is the most ideal choice and is often counterintuitive. As a mom, I should have gone home right away. As a business person doing a marketing job, it was very important that I take that opportunity that I didn't know existed. So your higher self might tell you to do something that kind of overrides what you think is common sense. But when you do it, the results are huge.
Okay. Yeah. I imagine keeping a journal of this 45-day experience is probably the best way to track results.
I think that's a marvelous idea. I've never told anyone to do that, but I'm going to now.
Yeah, I was thinking write down whether I got a yes or no, and then maybe another column for any repercussions or results that came from that.
Exactly. That's awesome. Totally awesome. What a great story. What a great idea.
I definitely appreciate all this information. It's taking me a while to sort through this and figure it all
I
out.
can tell that I really rocked your boat.
Yeah,
So,
this is great. And it complements all the information in your books. So I appreciate this a lot.
I think it's going to be an amazing documentary. And I am so looking forward to seeing the whole thing and what you have accomplished. And good fortune to you. And I will be holding space for you